And we're back with Mr. John Erling. I want to remember, and I'm trying desperately, but my old mind just won't pull it all up. One of the shticks I heard you do one morning, I'm late for something, and I'm barreling down the freeway in my Jeep, and I hear you take off on ORU. Refresh my
Yes,
memory.
well, it was a time when Oral was building the City of Faith, and he was inviting people all across the country and the world to come to the City of Faith. 60 stories high and how many beds and all that kind of thing. And so I decided, since I'm a dog lover, that we create the Kennel of Care. And that would be 60 stories high, 777 kennels. It'd be a dog house and a cat house out in front. And then, of course, there was the River of Life that was in front of it. And so that is what probably you were talking about.
That's what I remember.
And then when Oral had said that he'd be taken from this earth if he didn't raise X amount of dollars,
Yeah.
well, then I said, if I don't raise 50,000 pounds of cat and dog food to distribute to the homeless cats and dogs of this town, that my dog Louie will be taken from this earth. So I went out at 61st and Yale one morning. I was there at 6 o'clock, and I didn't know what this is going to take or not. And I'm laughing now as I think about it. I said, all right, folks, here I am. And my dog Louie is going to be taken from this earth if I don't raise his 50,000. Who's going to be the first to drive by? All you need to do is drive in, drop it off, and be on your way to work. When I looked down the street, and there was cars at least a mile long, just waiting to get in and drop all this cat and dog food off. And so we just raised a bundle of cat and dog food. And it was so neat that the community was having fun with me on this, on the Tulsa Mountain thing and on this story of the Kennel of Care. But I'm careful to say that, you know, I never made fun of
Well, I was just going
Oral's.
to say, you never did anything harmful. It was always in good fun.
It was.
And you get in a car now, and you drive across the country. You hear a lot of divisive, out-and-out hate spewed from the speakers of our radio. It's not like, John, when you were on the air, and things were fun and light, and you felt kind of good, kind of driving down the road.
Yeah, and it wasn't that we didn't take on issues, because we did at times, you know, because if something came up in the community, you talk about it. I was not politically oriented so that I was a political guy, that I needed to drive that agenda all the time, but we would touch on it. But I think the greatest things that I did were raising money for good causes. In fact, there was a policeman here in Claremore, and now that I think about it, he needed a liver transplant, and we raised a lot of money for that. It was raising money that really made me happy to address some of the great needs we had in the community. But let me just finish up about Oral. So Oral Roberts, when a friend of mine said, I think I can get Oral to interview you for Voices of Oklahoma, I said, I don't think he will. Well, just let me work on it. Chuck had worked for him for a long time, and pretty soon I was out in Arizona and get this call. It says, Oral Roberts. Yes, Oral, how are you? He said, tell me what you're doing. I said, I'm doing this Voices of Oklahoma website. I'd like to have your interview on it. He said, that's a good idea. So we went out to California to interview him. And I'm thinking, does he know what I did? I never made fun of his message, his gospel message. I never made fun of it. I was raised on the same gospel message he was, and I endorsed it. So when we're going along in the interview, he says, you know, the media, they were pretty tough on me, and they were, about his faith healing and all that nationally. He says, the media were really tough at me, and I never pushed back. Did I, John?
He knew.
And he had me. He knew. He didn't have time to listen to that radio station, but there were those who knew, and there were those who got mad because they thought I was really out to get him, and he knew it. And I'll never forget, my respect for him went right through the moon, to the moon, because he knew this, and it was his, and then 4 months later, he died. And now we've interviewed 235 people on voicesofoklahoma.com. It's a website.
That's what I wanted to make sure we get into, and we're going to do that at this point. This is the book, Voices of Oklahoma, that carries some of the activities that this man's been up to. And it's an idea I wish I'd had, quite frankly. I think it's a beautiful concept. someone should have done this or started this years ago.
Yeah.
And I wish I could somehow take credit for it, but I can't. Where did the idea come from?
Walt Helmrich of Helmrich and Payne. For some reason, he took a liking to me. He listening to the radio. He was a radio person, and Walt's secretary would call once a month. It's time for you to have lunch. And so over a period of 10 years, he would tell me these stories. And pretty soon he'd tell them 2 or 3 times. And I said, you know, we need to have other people listen to these stories, not just me and your family and your friends. And so we recorded him, and he says, well, I don't want to do a book, he says. My grandfather Colcord did a book, and nobody read it, so I'm not gonna do a book. I said, that's fine. Let's record again. So I had 2 recordings with him. And I was driving down the street. My best ideas come when I'm driving in my automobile somewhere. And I said, you know, if I took that story and put it on a website, and this is now, we've been doing this for 11 years, so about 12 years ago, when websites were just really coming in their own, I said, we put them on a website, and then we targeted to students and all, and I asked him, and he said, that'd be fine. Would you get your friend Henry Zero to interview? And so that's really how it got started, right? And we're celebrating then in April now our 11th anniversary, 10th anniversary of the website.
Is there going to be another book?
Well, I don't know. I've been so busy that we certainly have room for another book, and there's no question about that, but we don't have any plans at the moment.
I need to mention that John Hamill is also involved with you on this.
Yes. John, oh yes, yeah. He is probably, I can say, the main writer. I provided, obviously, the material and all for Voices of Oklahoma, and they can buy that real easy on Amazon or on Barnes & Noble on their online. Both of them, the books are.
And they can go to the website and hear the interview.
And you go to the interview, go to the website to listen to the interviews. What we're doing now is podcasting. And as you know, hundreds, maybe thousands of podcasts are out there now. And so for an old broadcaster, this is great. I don't have to meet a clock. I can go as far long and short as I want. We're putting our interviews on the podcasts. So when you go to the website or on your smartphone, you'll see a button there that says podcast, and you can listen to them, and that way you can stop and start whenever you want. And when you go running and walking, you can lose that. And we're beginning now a new podcast called Stories Behind the Voices. And what I'm going to be talking about is what was it like behind the scenes? Where did you go to interview the person? What kind of person was he when he wasn't being recorded? Sometimes there's some interesting stories, as you know. You could do that yourself here, as you know, about a recording and how it was made.
Sure.
And so I'm going to be telling those stories and then playing a little bit about that interview and then driving people to the website, voicesofoklahoma.com.
I'm going to make you uncomfortable.
Okay.
If I were to go through this book and look at the list of names, which I've done, I'm struck by the fact that I want to know who was the most intriguing, who was the most interesting, who impressed you more than the other. But I guess my first question is, who did you find most intimidating?
Well, probably Oral Roberts. I mean, I was scared silly. I was nervous. I was tense.
I can't imagine you nervous.
In front of Oral Roberts? This was, you know, sometimes when you're around and see people and so forth, you don't give them the credit due them. I mean, Oral Roberts was a very talented man, and I was very, very nervous when I went and did that interview. It scared me. John Williams of the Williams Companies, he was a big, brusque man, and he did wonderful things for Tulsa, and I was afraid of that. Well, he couldn't have been nicer and kinder. In fact, when the interview was over, he said, sit down. He says, let's just sit and talk. And of course, we know the great things that John Williams did in Tulsa. And names that come to mind immediately. Man, I'm sorry.
It's all right. You're getting up
dropping.
in years, and I understand that.
Right. I got to have this list, but there's one of them that he was a former justice of the Supreme Court, Marion Opala, and he had not been talking about, and he did not been talking about World War II and he was born in Poland. And when Hitler and the Nazis invaded Poland in 1939, he was there. He was 18 years old, and he joined the Polish underground. Rather, they recruited him. They'd walk up to him and they'd slip him a piece of paper, and they'd gone. And he would never ever know or see the person who gave him a piece of paper. And so he survived that. He walked out of Poland, actually joined the British, and he was good with the English language, and he could interpret. He told that story, and then he tells how he became prisoner of war. I can go on, and then he says, and we hid under haystacks. He says, and our colonel was so adroit, he says, he told us to come out with our hands up because the Germans would hide, they would impersonate the Allied forces. And we came out with our hands up, he says, and he starts to cry, he says. And fortunately, it was the Allied forces who had come out. Well, eventually, he knew a captain who knew somebody from Oklahoma, who knew somebody in Washington, D.C., and they got him a visa to come to the United States to become a citizen. So here's a man who was born in Poland, killed a few Nazis there, became his Chief Justice, and he has a wonderful, wonderful accent. Marian Opala is his name. It's one of them.
I knew this was going to happen. We have less than 30 seconds. We're out of time. I wish we had more time for this and more time for you. I consider it an honor that you chose to say, yes, I'll do it a second time. Thank you. And if you can, folks, get yourselves a copy. Tune in the podcast. John Erling is the man's name. He's making history by bringing history to life.
And I got to thank you, Sam. I appreciate it very much. You are such a natural, and you are so good at doing this yourself. So thank you, and you bring a lot to an interview. I appreciate it.
You owe me a quarter. We're out of time. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.